Welcome, Freddie. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get started.
Cool.
So we are at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. It's the 70th year that the festival has been put on. What's been the most inspiring thing you've seen or heard so far at Cannes this year?
It's been interesting. I mean, obviously you'd expect to be conversations around AI,
Sure.
conversations around sustainability, talked a bit about attention metrics. Maybe that was a bit last year, but heard that around a little bit. But the most interesting thing, I just was saying, but I think being back, going down and seeing the creatives, seeing the media work, being a media guy, I like to see the different executions and actually all the media that wasn't really media. So I enjoyed seeing some stuff around media placed on receipts and on actually printed on eggs and things like that, which is just kind of good fun. So I enjoyed seeing those pieces.
Yeah, it's really cool to go into the basement of the Palais and actually see the work.
Exactly.
You know, it's something that I think is not something people tend to forget about when they come to the festival. But you know, the festival and the awards are about the great work that has been done across the year. So it's a nice reminder of why we work in advertising, what's so cool about the space.
Exactly, yeah. After all the beaches and the parties and all the other fun stuff, it's quite nice to see the work.
All the trade publications always say that, like, Cannes is about the work, but people forget it's about the work.
Yes,
so
exactly.
It's a nice reminder of the creativity that's kind of circulating in our industry, whether it's across the number of different categories. So it's your first Cannes.
Yep.
You're the global head of media at HP.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your role at HP and what a global head of media does.
That's a good question. I sometimes wonder what I do.
Head of content, same question.
I guess in the role, I came into HP to build an in-house media team.
Yeah.
That was the plan. And honestly, I was actually sitting at the agency, funnily enough, and the head of media at that time came in and said, we're going to build it in-house. Yeah. And I kind of said, look, I'll come and do that with you. That'd be fun. And so I built that out. And so what do I look after now? I look after any advertising that we run across HP. And so 90% of that sits in-house, or 70% of that sits in-house, 90% of digital sits in-house. But I work with that and then our external agency, because we still do use an external agency and still need that expertise to help us with some of the creativity that we saw at Cannes.
Absolutely. So when you were given this task, hey, build out an in-house media agency. Yeah. Did you start fully from scratch? What did that look like? I can imagine that's quite a task.
Yeah, it was definitely scratch. Yeah. I launched the first campaign myself, which is good fun.
Yeah, fantastic.
I got back into the old. I probably shouldn't be saying this on LinkedIn, but on the Facebook platform was our first campaign. So sorry about that.
All good.
But we launched it. I launched that one. It was for a music festival, and then we built it from there. But it was funny because the first 6 months. I had this vision of obviously buying media and building an agency.
Of course.
And I sat down with finance and procurement and talked about invoicing and bills and how do we actually pay. And it was dreadfully boring. Yeah. But it was the first 6 months. So that's what we kind of did. And then we started to launch the media and then built it from scratch. Yeah. So we went from me being the first person, and then we built the US, and then we kind of grew out to the whole world.
That's fantastic. How did you locate all of that talent? I imagine there's a lot of, you mentioned talking to finance, procurement, thinking about billing, hiring, interviewing.
Yes.
That had to be quite a process to think through all of that and scale up.
It was, and hiring and interviewing is funny because you remember HP, we're good at buying engineers to build computers or build printers, or building a media team is not something that our recruiting team had ever done before. Right. So it's actually a good plug for LinkedIn, but we got on and we built our team through our own networks. Yeah. That was kind of the way we actually ended up doing it. I always joke and I give a really hard time to my recruitment team because I remember the first job rec we put into market was I got a person came through from the system, and they ran a car wash. And I looked at that and I went, that's not quite what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for a programmatic media buyer or a social media buyer. And that was it. And that was the kind of stuff. So then we did it through our network and we built the whole thing. And the way we did it was we did it by market by market. We hired the senior leadership and then used their networks to build the organization. And we did that around the world.
Oh, great. So, I think it's speaks to the power of connection in this industry. I think it's also why they look to leaders like you to kind of help start a practice like that, because you come from the agency world and hopefully have quite a vast, extensive network of folks you could tap to come to the brand side.
There's definitely that benefit of living in the agency world and knowing a lot of people.
Absolutely. So what was that transition like, going from an agency world to very venerable, of many years technology brand. Was that a stark contrast of working in the agency versus working in HP, or?
Yeah, it was. It's a really good question. It was a really big change. It was I came from most of my agencies I worked with were small, growing fast, very excited, much of energy. Not that that's not in HP, but it's an 80-year-old brand. Right. We've been doing printers and PCs for years, much other innovation before that, which I get into, scientific calculators and so forth. It's a very much a change. Yep. It was lovely getting closer to the business. That was the reason I wanted to go in-house, right? When that budget gets cut in the agency and your heart breaks, it's nice to be in the business and understanding why we cut the budget.
Right.
Not that I agree with it always, but it happens,
of course.
Right? So that part was great, and then, but also the challenge of trying to that comment. Media agency, you want to add a new partner, right? Or you want to work with a new format or whatever it is. Super easy because that's what the business is. Yeah. At HP, I wrote an insertion order. So, and this sounds silly to probably anybody in the industry, but writing up an insertion order so we could buy media took me 8 months. Because to get that through in HP, to the mentality that we can do that, what is an IAB?
What is this?
What is the term sheets that we like to use? It was very interesting.
I've hit similar obstacles. I think building out a content and social media marketing team in a historically, LinkedIn has a consumer business, but we also have a very large B2B engine as well, and it was primarily driven by SaaS products for a number of years. So you submit the insertion order, you submit the statement of work. What is this?
Yes.
Tell me what this is. What's the use case for this?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Exactly.
And it takes a while to educate folks. Hopefully the once you do it once or twice, that muscle starts to build, and you can get quite a bit more productive and agile.
Yes.
So, what kind of growth opportunities did the in-house transition lead to for you and your team?
Growth in the sense of the easiest one is just growing the in-house media buying capability, right? So we grew from, the original plan was social and programmatic, 10 people in the US. Now it's 150 people buying media across the globe. We bought print advertising, we're buying TV, we're buying out of home, we're buying, every kind of medium you can think of. See a lot of CTV. So that has been fun, and definitely from a growth perspective, I never thought I was going to be deep into the Chinese landscape of media partners, and things like that. So that's been good fun, and for the whole team. But then also helping the brand at HP, and this has been probably something I didn't really see coming, is we buy a lot of media as a marketing organization, but we also buy a lot of media outside the marketing organization. So we're helping HR right? We're helping the comms team. We're also helping our sales teams that are going into certain retailers and trying to sell and helping them with their advertising and marketing strategies. So it's been really good fun to kind of work with a lot of different people around the organization.
That's great.
And also just kind of educate different groups on media and what it is.
Well, I think especially in the agency, you have exposure to more clients and more businesses, but you may not necessarily have more exposure to internal cross-functional partners or stakeholders, across beyond the marketing organization, I'll say. So, I think I've found working in-house for a number of years, the ability to go deep on something, understand how the business works, what makes it tick, have kind of that really strong, I would say, like bench of cross-functional partners has been really cool and meaningful. We've been across this program at Cannes for 6-7 years, building studios like this, and it's cool to watch your kid grow up, so to speak.
100%. I talk to my team quite a lot about going from elementary school to middle school. And I feel like we've grown up now. Suddenly we're doing an X amount of money, and we're actually need to be a real team, and I can't put everything in Excel. I need to actually have processes, and I need to think things through now, and it's definitely good fun watching the whole thing grow.
We so at LinkedIn we are very big on B2B.
Yes.
We have a huge B2B use case. It's why we have conversations with leaders like yourself from HP. And we found that we recently did a study, and we found that around half of B2B leaders are optimistic that they're going to be able to drive revenue impact in the coming year. I think that tends to contrast itself from a lot of what we're hearing in the market of tech brands are in crisis. There's a lot of doom and gloom, economic uncertainty. et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
So, I'd love to understand what the tone is at HP and with your team.
Sure.
Especially in a media organization, you're in charge of a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the, historically, one of the first places that CFOs can look to cut, because it's just such a large, it's such a large pocket or sum. And a lot of folks in the finance industry may not understand the value of media to drive brand, but also to drive demand. So, would love to hear how things are going at HP. Do you see the optimism reflected that some of our B2B leaders may have? What challenges do you see?
See, it's funny, and talking about the CFO and the measurement, we definitely haven't got it perfect at HP in any sense. But optimistic, yes. It's been a rough time for us in the PC print. You can look at our earnings, you can look at that, right? It's COVID was, I hate saying COVID was good for us, because I feel it wasn't good for the world. No. But it was good from a B2B and a B2C model for us, with all the people moving home and needing to work from home. And now we've seen a real lull, and we're trying to come back. And I am positive about what's going to come back. Yeah. But it's especially funny. We just talked for the last 5-6 minutes, and I haven't talked about B2B. And like 70% of our business is B2B. Right. So I probably should have brought it up earlier. But it is. We're really optimistic on the ability for us to come back. Yeah. It's going to pick up. We're seeing the move back into the office through mandates, also through just needed community in the office and so forth. And for us, that's a good thing, right? Okay. So that's it. And then you talked about measurement, and you talked about getting our CFO. We've had massive budget cuts right across the business. Everyone should be saving money right now when you're in a business like ours. That's what's happening. But we're starting to see it come back as people are starting to look at ways for us to put back into marketing and start to build. Not even just move product from a DR perspective, but to also get back into the branding methodology and really starting to make sure people are thinking about HP as they come around to the next cycles and so forth in the buying journey. So we're definitely there.
Something you mentioned is that your buyers may not always be in market, but part of the reason you invest so heavily in like brand media is to make sure that when they are in market or when they're ready to buy, that you have the ability to be top of mind.
Exactly.
And it's something that we talk about a ton at LinkedIn, because I think the conventional wisdom is you want to shift spend over to demand generation, lead generation entirely, when you need to influence a very quick hit to the bottom line. But that sometimes comes at the cost of your longer term brand health. Because you're not necessarily you're not kind of marketing brand in the down cycle.
So it's 100%, and it's an interesting one, because as soon as you go into a world like we are in today and you want to move units, you go straight to that DR approach. And trying to show the value of brand, that's been a conversation around marketing for years. I still don't think we're there, right? And the value of being able to point out when that's going to bring us back return, and the value of our brand. So that's...
It's the conversation we have to continue to educate the rest of the organization as marketers, as folks who understand this, but knowing that it's can be a little bit of a challenge. But I think we're well on the way. At least at LinkedIn, we're really trying to be proactive about communicating that, and also communicating about the why. So my final question is, what is next for HP in the digital marketing space? What kind of trends do you see coming to the forefront?
Sure. AI content, I'm excited about the content creation side of things on that part. How do we actually we run media in 70 countries. It takes us a lot of energy, a lot of money to create content for 70 markets. I'm looking at AI to make that a lot easier. I'm excited about that part. I'm also excited about just new ways of creating content. We were chatting with some people yesterday about will Khan have an AI category next year, right? Will they be able to do a content category for it? So I'm really excited about that part. AI in the words of performance, media, and optimization. I'm interested to see what brands people bring out, but to me, it's been going on for years. So it's kind of like we got that one sorted.
Right.
So those from that side. Every year, I read the Forrester report that tells me people hate advertising. And I'm excited with some of the death of targeting in certain platforms, and some of the thinking about contextual content and so forth. I'm hoping that we can actually make advertising more relevant again.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to some of the beauty that we can bring back to that advertising that way. Still doing it within like a 2-second attention perspective, but I'm excited about some of the changes we'll probably see there. At HP, we went so deep into the hyper-targeted mentality, and I'm excited to see what we can do around the edges of that. Now, don't get me wrong, B2B, we're still going to be focused on ABM approaches and things like that because we have to.
Right.
But what kind of fun things can we do? Well, how can we play around the peripherals?
Right.
So,
well, I love that. I think it's so important to think about. We tend to put B2B in this box.
Yeah.
And okay, it has to be super rational. It has to be super sensible, and speak to only features because people only care about features. And it's like we forget that we're marketing to folks like you and me who are have wants and needs and emotions, and actually like B2B buying decisions tend to be the most you put your reputation on the line. You are attaching your professional credibility to a buying decision, which is an incredibly emotional thing. So how do we message to that as part of the marketing profession? So it's a really interesting challenge, and I'm glad that B2B leaders like yourself are recognizing the need for that creativity.
See what we can do.
Well, Freddie Liversidge, Global Head of Media for HP, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate your time.